Hi everybody, I'm Natalie with Missouri Star Quilt Company, and this week we're celebrating coziness and all things soft and warm. So I have a great quilt for you. I'm calling it Criss Cross Applesauce because we have this really beautiful crisscross of 4 patches throughout the quilt. And I'm using a lovely line. It's the Cozy Cotton Flannels Muted Color Story by Studio K for Robert Kaufman. And I think that it is going to be so soft and lovely. So let me show you how I did it. All right, so to make this quilt, I used a fat quarter bundle called Cozy Cotton Flannels, the Muted Color Story, as I said before, by Robert Kaufman. You're gonna need about 1 1/8 yards of background fabric, and that's for all of the 4.5-inch squares that are in this quilt. And your backing, you'll need about 5 yards if you're doing regular yardage, or 2.5 if you have a 108. Now the backing that I used is a 108, and it's a soft flannel. It's lovely. Let me show it to you. It's this really pretty swirly, it's kind of a cream color, and I think it goes really nicely with this fabric, but you could use anything you want. I ended up quilting it in one of our brand new quilting patterns called Clamshell Scallop number 1, and I love it. It's so cute. They kind of look like little clouds. And one other thing you might need is a squaring tool. We're making a bunch of half square triangles, so use whichever tool you feel most comfortable with, but you will need one of those and it'll make your life easier. You can still square with a regular tool if you want to, a regular ruler, but I like my block lock or my Clearly Perfect slotted trimmer for that job. So let's get started. All right, so the first thing you want to do when making this quilt is separate your fat quarters into sets of light and dark. And this fat quarter bundle is pretty good with lights and darks, but some of them get a little bit medium-ish. And so you'll see that throughout the quilt where we have some fabrics that aren't like maybe these two. You can't really tell like a clear light and dark, so you just kind of have to pick your fabric that's going to be your dark fabric and put it where it goes as far as the light-dark distribution of colors. So I think this quilt would look really cool if we had a much sharper contrast with like a light dark that you could really tell, but I also love it in this very soft, gentle, muted look. I think it's really fun. So we're going to take these 2 fat quarters, I'm going to open them up and we're going to pair them together because we're going to just do our cuts at the same time. It just makes life a little easier. You can press these if you want to. I think I'll layer them up and then press them. Makes life a little easier, but it's, you know, to your preference. We're going to do quite a bit of cutting before we get started. Fat quarters are great because you can get a lot of cuts, a lot of variety to make whatever type of quilts you want to make. It's enough to get 2 10-inch squares and 2 to 3 2.5-inch strips, depending on if it's exactly 18 inches or not. And we're going to cut lengthwise, meaning from the selvage edge to where the the fold would be in your fabric. So the first thing I'm going to do is make sure that my starting edge is clean and straight. Let me scoot this over just a little bit more. So I have plenty of room, and I've lined up my selvage with the bottom, or with this straight line down here. Just going to trim that off. Then I'm going to make a 10-inch cut and 2 2.5-inch cuts. And you'll want to keep your pairs together, your fat quarter sets, because they just get sewn together, and it's easier if you keep them in their little pairs. All right, so I could probably get one more. I'm going to go ahead and cut it just because whether I'm going to use it in this quilt project or not, it's a little easier for me to store a 2.5-inch strip than just a random strip, especially when it's this close. So this is just doing future Natalie a favor. All right, so we're going to keep our 2.5-inch squares on one side. We're going to turn this and subcut to get 2 sets of 10-inch squares. Let me trim this beginning edge. Whoops. And then, oh dear. Let me keep them nice and lined up so our squares stay square. There we go. And I always just kind of set them crosswise so that my sets kind of stack up like that, and then I'll get to them. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is make our 4 patches. So we're going to take these, put them right sides together, and stitch the whole strip on one side. Always got to pause and reposition because I noticed my fabric wasn't quite as lined up as I wanted it to be. That's okay. All right, now while the strip is still folded and stitched, we're going to cut a bunch of 2.5-inch segments. And then these will be turned into our, let me clean up this edge as well. These are going to be turned into our 4 patches. It's a super easy way of getting a lot of cuts out of, or a lot of 4-patch cuts at once when you strip piece them like this. All right. So I do 2.5 and I make sure that my seam is lined up. I'm only going to cut a couple of these because we don't need to make that many. I've got a bunch of pieces made ahead of time, you know, for ease and convenience. But you'll go through and do all of your 4 patches and then your half square triangles. We'll get to those in just a minute. All right, so you can press these back. And I found with 4 patches, if you press them all towards one fabric, then when you flip them, they're going to automatically nest. So you can press to the dark side, whichever fabric is the dark for that set. All right. Then we take these and we spin one and we've got beautiful little 4 patches. So let me stitch this together. And there we go, a lovely little 4 patch. And this should measure 4.5 inches square. That is the measurement of all of our pieces for these blocks. All right, so we'll set that aside. Now we're going to take the 10-inch square sets, and we're going to make our half square triangles. What we're going to do is place them right sides together and draw an X on the back, diagonal lines corner to corner. Make sure they're nice and lined up. And you can use whatever pen you like, whatever's comfortable. I found that ballpoint works really well on flannel. Makes a nice line. And it's inside, plus you're cutting through it, so you don't have to worry about marking on the fabric and having it show. All right, we are going to stitch, once we've got our X drawn, we'll stitch on both sides of both lines, and then I'll show you how to cut them apart. I love this method for making a bunch of half square triangles at once. It's just great. That side, then we'll flip it, turn it around, and go back down the other side. And we'll do the other one next. All right, now we've got our stitches stitched, and it's time for all the magic to happen. So I will cut these apart, always doing my horizontal and vertical cuts first because my lines are drawn on my diagonal cuts. So I prefer to do the undrawn cuts first. So first we're going to cut vertically, and then we'll cut horizontally. Then we're just going to go diagonally on the line, corner to corner, and this gives us 8 half square triangles. So I'm going to go ahead and use my Clearly Perfect slotted trimmer to trim these up before pressing. And to do that, I line up on my 4.5 inch line here. There's a dashed line that goes on your seam line. This one side is pretty good, so I'm just going to slide that over, make this cut, and then cut my little dog ear points off. And then we've got these beautiful half square triangles ready to go. All right, so these should also measure 4.5. The next thing we're going to do is cut some strips out of our background fabric. Now, I've got my strips cut already. I'm going to go ahead and do my sub-cutting. I'm going to clean up this first edge, line it up with the line. There we go. And cut 4.5 inch squares. Now, I don't remember the exact number of 4.5 inch squares, but that information is in the pattern. Let's see. Oh. There we go. So now that we've got half square triangles and 4 patches made, and we're going to make all of them because we mix and match, this whole quilt is completely scrappy. And I've got some of those made, but it's time to go ahead and lay the block out because I've got all the pieces that I need. Okay, so we are ready now to lay out our block. We have all the pieces that we need. We're going to start with our 4 patches just because this is the easiest thing for me to remember as far as getting going. We want all of our dark fabrics and the 4 patches to be oriented to create a diagonal line. So whatever your dark is that you've chosen for that, maybe we do this one because we've got greens in here. Makes no difference really, but you put your dark fabrics in one straight line. Then we're going to add our background. We have 2 pieces and they go up here and here, little 4.5 inch squares. And now it's time for our half square triangles, and the dark fabrics all align facing up. So let's put this one right here. Grab some more. We've got a dark fabric up here. And then these 2, let's see. Gotta find ones I like. this, yep, this way. I just keep double checking myself, you know, because it is easy to get turned around. So this is one where I would suggest either keeping the diagram nearby or making one block and then having it in front of you as reference as you continue to make these blocks. I'll swap them. There we go. And that's it. That is the block. So I'm going to go ahead and stitch it together, and then I'll show you how it fits into the quilt, because the quilt is made up of putting these blocks together in different orientations. So I'm going to chain piece these ones just like this. I love doing this method because it makes everything come out so much. So it's just neat, and it helps my brain to make sure that I'm not making any mistakes. All right. And so far, we don't have anything to match up. I just want to make sure that my seams are accurate, and I'm working with stuff that's lined up properly at this point. But we're not worried about nesting seams or anything. I will say on these half square triangle sets, you're going to have a seam on the back almost every time. And so you want to make sure that you put your fabric far enough under your presser foot so that it doesn't push it down into the feed dogs and create like a nest. That was a little bit challenging for me. So just a heads up on that. Could be challenging. Alrighty. Now I'm going to take this set that's all hooked together by their little seams. I'm going to open it up and add this block to this side, one at a time as I go down. There we go. And then my next one, I'm going to open up my little book, add my half square triangle. And same here. Adding my little 4-patch, keeping it going the right direction with any luck. Okay. Now I've got this lovely little square that's sort of held together by its threads. I'm going to fold this one down first. And now typically what I do, the reason that I like this method is because then I can decide which seams go which direction. And with flannels, it gets bulky fast. So you kind of want to be careful about that. So I'm going to push the one on these so that they're nesting and going opposite directions as I go. And then when I do the other side, I'll know exactly which way the seams are going. Keep her lined up nice and square. I will say that working with flannel is very nice. It feels almost luxurious because it's so soft. A lot of people ask too about shrinkage when working with flannel, because traditionally flannel shrinks at a different rate than your cotton fabrics. And so my advice is, if you're using all flannels from the same time period that are all the same make, you're fine because they will shrink all at the same rate. But if you're mixing and matching flannels, maybe from your stash, you might want to go ahead and wash that fabric ahead of time so that it also will then be pre-shrunk and continue to shrink at the same rate once you've made your quilt. So just be careful, but the other thing I like though is a good crinkly fuzzy quilt, so I don't think you can really mess this up. It's going to be great either way. Got one more seam and our block will be complete. I'm going to give it a good press and then I will show you the block. It turned out so pretty. It's a very rewarding quilt to make. I like it a lot. But then again, I think all quilts are rewarding to make. It's so fun to just take those pieces of fabric and turn them into a really cool pattern that just looks so pretty. And then also shares your love with whoever you give it to. Whether you give it away or keep it for yourself, it's still gonna give love. All right, that is our block. It's very cool. And so on the quilt, you'll see we start with one up here. And then what they do is they go in a circle. So all of these little 4 patches face the middle. So you can put them together in quadrants like this, or you can just do rows where you've got this one going this way, and then you flip it, and then flip it this back, back and forth, whoops, keeping your 4 patches towards the center of that segment. So that is how that goes. Just like that. And I put together, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 across by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 down. This quilt measures 60 by 72. And it's super fun and easy and a great little snuggly lap quilt. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial on the Criss Cross Applesauce from Missouri Star Quilt Company. Thank you so much for joining me for this video today. I hope that you enjoyed it and that it inspired your creativity. And guys, we're at almost 1 million quilters strong in our community. So if you know of anybody that you think might like to join us and learn quilting with us, bring them on in, put your arm around them, and tell them to subscribe to our channel so that we can all learn and grow together.